In the heart of the Ozark Mountains, tucked away from the hum of highways and the glow of city lights, there's a place that feels untouched, almost sacred. Devil's Den State Park, a mosaic of ancient sandstone crevices, whispering pines, and trails that twist like veins through the forest. On July 26th, 2025, one of those trails would become the site of something so sudden, so vicious, it would shatter a young family forever and leave two little girls with memories no child should carry. The Brinks had come here for peace. Clinton David Brink, 43 years old, a father with the kind of laugh that could fill a room. He had the kind of smile that made strangers feel like friends. They'd moved here from South Dakota just months earlier. A new job delivering milk in the mornings, evenings free for family dinners, and weekends for adventure. Cristen Amanda Brink, 41, a nurse, a mother, a woman whose friends say could make you feel seen with just a look. Gentle hands even off duty. Her quiet strength was the glue of their little world. Their two daughters, just 7 and 9. At that age where everything in nature is a discovery. The shape of a leaf, the way water ripples over stones. That morning, the sun had risen behind a thin veil of clouds, casting the park in a soft, silvery light. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and wet earth. Perfect hiking weather. Clinton had his camera slung around his neck, eager to capture the day. Cristen carried the snacks, grapes, granola bars, and bottled water in a worn blue backpack. The girls darted ahead, skipping over roots, stopping to point out butterflies and tiny orange mushrooms sprouting from the moss. The trail they chose was the Yellow Rock Loop, a 3.1-mile path that winds upward toward an overlook with a sweeping view of the valley below. For most families, it's a leisurely hike, a couple of hours, maybe more if you stop for photos. And the Brinks, they weren't in any rush. Cristen paused often, crouching to admire the way the morning dew clung to spiderwebs. Clinton lifted his camera, framing the girls against a backdrop of green and stone. Every so often, the wind carried in the distant sound of water from Lee Creek, hidden somewhere beyond the ridge. It was the kind of day you imagine turning into a perfect memory, until the moment something shifted. At first, it was nothing more than a sound, a rustle, not the scattered flutter of a bird or the quick scamper of a squirrel. Something heavier, slower. Clinton glanced over his shoulder. The trail behind them was empty, just a narrow path, framed by the undergrowth. Probably a deer, Cristen said lightly, giving him a small smile. But even as she said it, her eyes lingered there a second longer than usual. They kept walking. The girls, oblivious, darted ahead again, their laughter echoing against a stone. Cristen called out for them to stay where they could be seen. And that's when the second sound came. Closer this time. Footsteps, not hurried, not hesitant, just steady and following. Clinton slowed his pace until Cristen was beside him. They didn't speak, but something unspoken passed between them. A subtle tightening of her jaw, his shoulders squaring as they rounded a bend. The trail opened briefly into a sunlit clearing. Here, they could see farther in every direction. The air was warmer, the sunlight breaking through in golden patches. They stopped, letting the girls rest on a fallen log. Cristen handed them water. Clinton lifted his camera again, but his eyes kept drifting back toward the shadowed edge of the trail. There was no one there, but deep in the green movement, the faintest flash of color. The Brinks didn't know it yet, but they were not alone. The man who was trailing them, he'd come here with no backpack, no hiking gear, no companion, just a knife, and an intent that no one who crossed his path would survive. As they resumed walking, the trail narrowed again. The canopy overhead thickened, the air cooling in the shade. The footsteps came again, quickening. Cristen turned sharply. This time she saw him. A man, late 20s maybe, tall, thin, a black t-shirt clinging to his frame. His expression empty, not lost, not curious, just fixed on them. Clinton stepped forward slightly, his body instinctively shielding his family. Cristen reached for the girls, pulling them close. "Can I help you?" Clinton called out. The man didn't answer. He just kept walking. The sound of his shoes on the gravel was deafening now. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The Brinks began to move again, faster this time. The trail curved ahead, leading into another dense stretch. Cristen gripped the girl's hands. Clinton looked back one last time, and that's when the man broke into a run. Everything after that happened in a blur, and in a way that would replay in the minds of two little girls for the rest of their lives. Cristen shouted, "Go! Run to the car!" Her voice sharp, urgent. The girls bolted forward, their small legs pumping, their shoes slipping on loose stones. Clinton turned to face the man, but the glint of steel caught the corner of his eye. The blade was already in motion. In that split second, the forest lost its peace. This was the moment everything changed. The girls ran, through the twisting trail over roots and rocks, through patches of sunlight that blurred in their tears. Their father's voice was gone now, replaced by the pounding of their hearts. Behind them, the forest exploded in chaos. Cristen had pushed them forward, hard, before spinning back toward her husband. She could have kept going. She could have stayed with the girls, hidden, prayed that Clinton could hold the man off long enough to escape. But she didn't. Cristen Brink was a nurse, a wife, a mother, and she was not leaving him to face this alone. She turned on her heel, sprinting back up the path. The air was thick, her chest tight, every instinct screaming at her to protect her children, and yet her legs carried her toward the danger. When she rounded the bend, the scene before her carved itself into memory. Clinton was on the ground. The man in black was over him, the knife in his hand, rising, falling. Clinton's camera lay shattered nearby, the lens cracked, the strap tangled in the dirt. Cristen didn't think. She charged. Her hands hit his shoulder hard, shoving him sideways. The man stumbled, snarling, his eyes wild now, teeth clenched. Cristen dropped to her knees beside Clinton. Blood. Too much. She pressed her hands to the wound, her training taking over in the worst possible setting. "Stay with me," she whispered. Clinton's eyes locked on hers. There was fear there, but also something else. A look that said, "Go, save yourself." But there was no time. The man was already back on his feet. He came at her. No words, no hesitation. Just the gleam of the blade and the sound of his breath. Cristen scrambled up, stepping between him and her husband. The knife caught her side first, a hot, searing shock that stole her breath. She didn't stop moving. Her hands went up, pushing against his arm, his chest, anything to keep him back. But he was stronger and relentless. It said in moments of mortal danger, time slows. For Cristen, it wasn't the seconds she counted, it was the faces in her mind. Her daughters waiting down the trail. Her husband, beneath her now, slipping away. Her knees buckled, the world tilted. The canopy above, once just green and shadow, became a swirl of shapes. She hit the ground, her hand still reaching toward Clinton. And then nothing. When the girls reached the parking lot, they didn't stop running. Another hiker saw them, their clothes dirty, their cheeks streaked with tears, and rushed to meet them. The words came out in pieces. "Mom, Dad, a man." The hiker grabbed a phone, dialing 911. Somewhere up the trail, the man in black was already disappearing into the woods. When first responders arrived, the forest was quiet again. The sounds of the park, the rustling leaves, the steady trickle of the creek, felt almost cruel in their normalcy. Clinton and Cristen Brink lay side by side. No pulse, no second chances. In less than 3 minutes, the trail had gone from a place of laughter to a crime scene. The man who did this didn't leave a note. He didn't take anything from their bodies. He didn't even seem to have a reason. But he had left something behind. Something small, almost invisible to the naked eye. A trace of himself. Forensic team swept the scene. DNA, tiny flecks, a partial fingerprint smudged on a fallen water bottle. Every inch of the path combed, photographed, bagged. And somewhere out there, the killer was walking free. For the Brink girls, that day became a line in their lives. There was before, and there was after. In after, the world was quieter. Adults spoke in hushed voices. Every shadow seemed heavier, and somewhere deep in the Ozarks, the trees still held the memory of July 26th. By the time the sun dipped behind the ridge that evening, the Devil's Den trail was empty. The crime scene tape stretched across the entrance like a silent warning. Inside the perimeter, Flashlights swept over the dirt, catching glimpses of crimson and scattered belongings. Outside it, two little girls sat wrapped in blankets, their small bodies shivering, not from the cold, but from shock. The man who had torn their lives apart was gone. The manhunt began before midnight. Arkansas State Police, Washington County Sheriff's deputies, park rangers, every available unit combed through the forest. Dogs picked up the scent in bursts, leading officers down steep inclines across the creek through the underbrush. But each time, the trail faded. Whoever he was, he knew how to disappear. Back at the command post, investigators worked another angle. The crime scene had yielded DNA, not much, but enough. If they could match it to someone already in the system, they'd have a name. But hits like that don't come instantly. And until then, they needed leads. Witness reports trickled in. A lone man seen near the trailhead that morning. Black t-shirt, dark hair, thin build. No backpack. No water. Just wandering. Some said he'd been pacing near the parking lot. Others thought he looked lost, or maybe high. But no one had seen him leave. It was as if he'd stepped out of the trees and melted back into them. The first breakthrough came not in the woods, but in the lab. Within days, the DNA profile came back. It matched a man with no felony convictions, but with a history that made detectives' stomachs tighten. His name was Andrew James McGann, 28 years old, a newly hired teacher candidate for Springdale Public Schools. He'd been preparing to start the school year in just weeks. McGann's record was clean enough to pass background checks. But a closer look told a different story. In Texas, where he'd previously worked, there'd been concerns. Professional judgment questioned. Behavior in the classroom that unsettled colleagues. Enough for administrative leave, but not enough for charges. He'd also done stints in Oklahoma schools, each time moving on quietly when things didn't work out. Still, nothing tied him to murder. Until now, the DNA didn't lie. The odds of it belonging to someone else were astronomically low. On July 30th, just 4 days after the attack, detectives closed in. McGann was tracked to a barbershop in Springdale, Lupita's beauty salon. Inside, he sat in the chair, a black cape draped over him, bits of hair falling to the floor. To anyone else, he was just another customer. To the officers waiting outside, he was a killer. The arrest was fast, controlled. 2 plainclothes officers stepped in, flanking him. One hand on his shoulder, another on the cuffs. The barber froze, mid-snip, scissors in the air. McGann didn't resist. Outside, he was read his rights. Customers craned their necks, peering through the shop window, trying to make sense of the scene. Within minutes, the man who had vanished into the woods was now in the back of a squad car. During questioning, McGann didn't spin a wild story. He didn't try to blame anyone else. He admitted it. No clear motive. No explanation that could make sense of what he'd done. Just a cold fact. He had followed the Brinks and ended their lives. But even as they processed him into custody, another question began to take shape. Was this his first time? Detectives in Wisconsin reached out. 5 years earlier, in October 2020, a man named John Schmutzer had been stabbed to death while hiking alone in Devil's Lake State Park. The similarities were haunting. The location names, Devil's Den, Devil's Lake. The brutality. The randomness. No one had ever been charged in Schmutzer's case. Now, McGann's DNA was being compared to evidence from that unsolved murder. If it matched, the scope of his crimes could be far wider than anyone imagined. For the Brink family, the arrest brought relief, but not closure. Their girls still woke from nightmares. Their homes still echoed with absence. And the question of why, the one word every survivor asks, remained unanswered. For days. That's all it took for police to put a name and face to the man who had turned a peaceful Saturday hike into a nightmare. But justice? That would take far longer. The day after Andrew McGann's arrest, the trails at Devil's Den were quiet. The yellow tape was gone, but the air still carried the weight of what had happened there. At the overlook, where Clinton had planned to take photos that day, the wind moved gently through the trees, but there were no hikers, just silence. In Prairie Grove, the Brinks' small rental house had become a gathering point. Neighbors brought casseroles, paper plates, juice boxes for the girls. Inside, relatives from South Dakota and Montana sat shoulder to shoulder, speaking in low tones. Every so often, one of the girls would slip into a lap, asking the same question again. When is mommy coming home? And each time someone would hold them tighter, because there was no easy way to answer. News crews parked along the street. Satellite vans, reporters with microphones. Headlines scrolling across the bottom of TV screens. Arkansas couple fatally stabbed at state park. Suspect, newly hired teacher. The story gripped the country, not just because of its brutality, but because of the sheer randomness. Two people doing something so ordinary, so safe, and never making it back. At Clinton and Cristen's memorial service, there were more tears than seats. Friends from every chapter of their lives had come. South Dakota co-workers, Montana neighbors, Arkansas church members. Photographs lined the tables. Cristen in scrubs, smiling with her nursing team. Clinton holding his daughters on his shoulders at a county fair. The four of them at a picnic table. A half-eaten birthday cake in front of them. The pastor spoke about courage, about how Cristen had acted on instinct, turning back when most would have kept running, about how Clinton had stood between his family and a stranger with a weapon. They gave everything they had in those final moments, he said, and in doing so, they gave their daughters a chance to live. As the weeks passed, the shock began to settle into something heavier, grief mixed with anger. Letters poured into the Washington County Prosecutor's office. People wanted to see McGann tried and punished as quickly as possible. But the law moves slowly, and this was a capital case. At his first court appearance, McGann was led in wearing a jail-issued jumpsuit. His wrists were chained at his waist. The judge read the charges. 2 counts of capital murder, 2 counts of aggravated assault for the terror inflicted on the Brink children. McGann spoke little. Yes, Your Honor, to confirm his name. No, when asked if he had questions. Bail was denied. Outside the courthouse, the Brinks' relatives stood with their attorney, speaking for the first time. They were good people, a cousin said, voice breaking. They loved the outdoors. They loved each other. We just want justice. In Springdale, the school district scrambled to explain how a man now accused of a double homicide had been hired at all. The superintendent faced microphones, insisting McGann had passed all background checks. Still, the outrage was loud, especially from parents. If he could slip through the system once, how many others could? For the 2 little girls, life became a series of adjustments. New bedrooms in a relative's home. Counseling appointments twice a week. A box of their parents' things, a sweater still smelling faintly like Cristen's perfume. A pocket knife Clinton used on camping trips. They held onto these items like anchors, proof that before had been real. Months from now, they will likely be called to testify, not on the stand, but through recorded interviews, recounting the fragments of memory they still carry. The sound of footsteps, their mother's voice yelling for them to run, the glimpse of a stranger's face. The trial will be about evidence, DNA swabs, surveillance footage showing McGann near the park entrance that morning, witness accounts from other hikers. But for the Brink family, it will always be about 2 people who just wanted a day in nature, who never came home. Devil's Den remains open. Families still hike its trails. The overlook still gives the same breathtaking view. But for those who know the story, the wind sounds a little different here now, as if it's carrying a warning. And somewhere in Wisconsin, investigators are still waiting on results from the Devil's Lake case to see if the man now sitting in an Arkansas jail might be tied to another life cut short. The law will have its process. The community will have its grief. And the Brink girls will have a lifetime of remembering. July 26th, 2025, a day that began with sunlight and laughter and ended with 2 heroes, Clinton David Brink, Cristen Amanda Brink, husband and wife, mother and father, gone too soon but not without a fight. The forest had fallen eerily quiet, not the kind of silence you get after a loud noise, but the strange, hollow kind that seems to come when the world is trying to understand what just happened. Cristen lay on the damp ground, the earthy scent of pine mixing with the metallic tang of blood in the air. The leaves above swayed gently, the sunlight flickering over her pale skin in slow, lazy patterns, completely out of sync with the chaos that had just unfolded. Somewhere far down the trail, she could hear her daughter's muffled sobs. They were safe. That thought was her anchor. No matter how much pain coursed through her, no matter how heavy her limbs felt, she had done what she needed to do. The man, the stranger, stood over her. His chest rose and fell with deep, uneven breaths. His face was unreadable. Not wild, not frenzied, just cold. He looked at her like she was an object, not a person. For a moment it seemed like he might speak, but instead he turned, and just like that, he was walking away. The sound of his footsteps faded, swallowed by the trail, by the trees, by the indifferent wilderness. Cristen didn't understand. Why hadn't he finished it? Why had he stopped? Her mind was spinning. She pressed her palm to the wound at her side, the warm, sticky blood slipping through her fingers. The forest above her swam in and out of focus. By the time the girls reached the road, a man in a faded baseball cap was pulling a cooler from his truck. They were crying, screaming words that tumbled over each other. "Mama in hurt. Devil's Den." The man's face paled. He didn't ask more questions. He just pulled out his phone and called 911. His voice trembled as he tried to explain. "There's been a stabbing. A woman, kids are here. We're at Devil's Den." The dispatcher's calm, practiced voice seemed so out of place against the panic in the air. Back on the trail, Cristen tried to move, but her body wouldn't obey. Every attempt to push herself up sent a wave of dizziness through her. She could taste copper in her mouth. Somewhere in the distance, faint but growing, came the sound of voices. Not the strangers. Different. Male. Concerned. Urgent. Two hikers rounded the bend. One gasped. The other immediately rushed to her side. "Ma'am, you're going to be okay. We've got you." They tried to keep her still, pressing fabric, maybe a t-shirt, against her wound. One of them pulled out a phone, pacing as he spoke to 911, glancing back every few seconds to make sure she was still breathing. The minutes that followed blurred together. The shrill wail of sirens in the distance, the thud of boots on dirt, the metallic clatter of equipment. Paramedics worked quickly, their hands moving with a rehearsed urgency. An oxygen mask covered her mouth, cold air flooding her lungs. Her vision narrowed to a small tunnel of light. Her last clear thought before the world went black was of her daughters. Their faces streaked with tears, but alive. Alive because she had pushed them away as they loaded her into the ambulance. The forest remained still, almost mockingly peaceful. Somewhere out there, the man who had attacked her was walking free. Somewhere, his footprints still pressed into the dirt. But the peace of Devil's Den had been shattered, and the hunt for a killer had just begun.